Hello, it is wonderful to be back with a new episode of Open Conversations, a series wherein which I speak to LGBTQI+ musicians, performers, songwriters, producers and composers. My name is Will Davenport. I am a composer myself and I'm incredibly grateful to have been offered this platform with ConnectsMusic by Emily Saunders. This is part 2 of my conversation with the prolific composer Philip Venables. You can click the link below and watch part 1. As part 2 of this conversation, Philip talks about their collaboration with David Hoyle. They also talk about music for installation, or in particular an installation that they did for Canal Street in Manchester. We also talk about crossing boundaries and spaces within music. We finish by getting a slight teaser of what Philip is working on next. So please do stay tuned to find out. Firstly, how was it working with David? Like, that must have been an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. He's like a total hero, and it was really amazing. Yeah, I've worked with him a number of times now, but the first version of that piece in 2015, there was a kind of shorter version of it commissioned in 2015, which was the first time I had ever worked with him.
It's really interesting that you keep adding sort of a new version so how many versions?
We've only done one other version.
Oh, one other version. Okay.
Yeah, there were only 2 versions, and the second version was an extension, basically. So the first version is entirely encapsulated in the second version, but then there's a whole other chunk of material in the second version, and the video is reshot and remade, or some extra video is reshot and remade. But there won't be any other new versions, no matter how many more general elections there are in the UK. Actually, I can do a little plug, because the piece is being revived again this year by the New Music Biennial for their 10-year retrospective. So it's happening. We're doing it with the London Sinfonietta again in Coventry at the end of April, and then in the South Bank Centre at the beginning of July. And Andrew Burke, actually, from the Sinfonietta, asked me if I, just a few months ago, whether I wanted to make another version for the here and now, which is tempting in a way, because obviously there's a lot to talk about. But no, I think the piece exists now as a moment in time.
It's still incredibly relevant in a painful way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially with the section war. It's sort of terrifying. I mean, of course, it's an excuse to get David Hoyle in a room and collaborate with them again. How did you set up that collaboration? Did you start a camera and say go, or what was the process with David?
Yeah, pretty much that was how it worked. We didn't know what we wanted to make. I was a massive fan of David's shows and had been to so many of his shows at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern. So we basically modeled it on that kind of diatribe or speaking to camera, the kind of improvisation that he does on stage. So we just were hosted by a friend of his in Manchester in their apartment, and set the camera up and had a few drinks, and it was very chill, chatted a bit, and then would do a little filming session, and he would just basically improvise and riff. And we had some kind of key words or key kind of themes to talk about, because it had been commissioned, the first version had been commissioned for the eve of the general election in 2015 as a message to the new government. So that was very much themed about democracy and about gender and revolution. And then the new version in 2017 was also another general election by chance, and also the 50th anniversary of the legalization of homosexuality. So we talked a lot about that in the 2017 version as well. But basically, he just riffed on these kind of key themes, and I ended up with in the 2015 about 3 hours of footage, and then another 2 hours of footage when we reshot more material in 2017. And from that, I just picked, it's probably no more than about 7 minutes of footage in the entire video, what with all of the cutting and repetition.
Interestingly, that also, obviously, David Hoyle probably isn't a figure that you see in a concert hall. It's more sort of queer. It's queer cabaret entering into the concert hall, and it sort of struck me that that's really crossing like a boundary between different spaces. And is this something that you're constantly thinking about, like breaking down the boundary of, you know, what is a concert hall, what is contemporary classical music?
Maybe a bit. I mean, it's nice to be provocative. I like that. At least when there's maybe not just for the sake of it, but at least when there's a good reason to. And there certainly was a good reason to be provocative when you're commissioned to write a piece that's on the eve of a general election about the state of the world and a message to the new government. I mean, if you can't capture your anger, then there's not going to be a better opportunity to bring that into the concert hall. So in this sense, it fitted really well. I mean, I don't suppose otherwise it's much that I think about. As I say, he's just an artist that I really, really love and have loved for years, and was kind of looking for an opportunity to work with somehow, even though I was terrified to approach him because I was so intimidated. And in the end had to do so through a mutual friend, because that was the only way that I kind of felt comfortable sounding him out. When the Sinfonietta asked me about this, it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to get him involved, and probably one that wouldn't come around very often.
No, but would you like to write more for David?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since then we have worked on other things together. It wasn't. Yeah, there were more things after that anyway. I did a sound installation for Canal Street in Manchester with him, which was really, really nice for the Manchester Festival, which was kind of about the queer histories of that street and about Manchester and the gay community there. And then I did another project. He was involved in another project with the Sinfonietta called Gender Agenda in 2018. So yeah, and I'm sure there will be other things in the future too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that installation sounds really, really interesting. So how did you, that's such a massive commission, that's such a massive subject. Like, how do you start with something with such big scale?
I mean, it wasn't actually that big. It was just 10 minutes, strictly 10-minute piece, had to be exactly 10 minutes long. They got 6 composers or sound artists to make pieces for the city for the festival that year called Music for a Busy City. And they were each 10 minutes long in different places in the city, so that the whole thing added up to an hour, and the whole thing played on an hour-long loop, basically. When they asked me, I mean, I'm originally from Chester, so not that far away from Manchester, and certainly I went to Manchester a lot as a kid. Yeah, so when they asked me to do it, I was like, well, obviously they had to be outdoor locations. I was like, oh, obviously I'm going to do this in Canal Street, because it's such an important site for the queer community. Well, I would say in the whole of the UK, not just in Manchester. And also David lives in Manchester, and yeah, he's very connected there too. So yeah, it just seemed like a really obvious fit. But then it was just 7 channels, so 7 speakers outside, like mounted in the trees opposite the bars along Canal Street. And we recorded some brass quintet music with the Manchester Camerata, and recorded David's voice over the top. And the same approach as with Illusions, we just in fact we recorded it on the same day, I think, because they were both in 2017 as the reshoot material for Illusions. So we spent some time just doing the new video stuff for Illusions, and then a few hours doing audio material for Manchester. Yeah, again, we just recorded a lot of his kind of improvisations and thoughts about Manchester, and I took bits. It was much calmer than Illusions, more reflective piece. So it wasn't the kind of like white hot anger, but more reflective, more intimate in a way.
Have you done many installations?
No, actually, I've only done 2. That was the first one, and then I did another much bigger one this autumn, the last autumn in Paris, in this enormous church in the middle of Paris, which was 42 channels, speakers all around the church. That was another very meta piece. It was called Venables Plays Bach, and it was about my relationship to a little Bach prelude that I have played basically every day, that I sit down at the piano since I was about 15 years old. And it's a piece that I play that just kind of clears my head when I sit down to compose, or as a way to focus, or just as a way to find improvisation, or to undo a blockage, or if I get distracted or whatever. So yeah, it was all about me and this little Bach prelude, basically.
Obviously, like when you're working with installation, you think more about how people are going to interact with the space. So firstly, how did people respond to the Canal Street installation? Did you was there a sort of dialogue with how people were going to interact with it, how people took it afterwards?
Yeah, the Canal Street one was kind of weird because that strip of land essentially has so much of its own sound going on during the day, and the piece would like go on this hour loop right through until 9 or 10 p.m. I think, which is when or maybe 8 or 9 p.m. maybe, which is when all the bars were pumping out like pop. So you'd have kind of David Hoyle's voice talking about the Peterloo massacre, going against Britney Spears or something coming out of a nearby bar, and like on the Friday night when it was playing, there was hundreds of people outside. It was in the middle of summer, and so it was a very weird juxtaposition of those two worlds. But during the day, when it was a bit calmer and it was more just people having coffee, or it was nice. It just kind of like added another dimension to the kind of soundscape of that street, if you like.
It doesn't get any more meta than that, does it? Sort of
yeah.
In your music.
I mean, obviously, some people I think found it really interesting and really engaging, and other people were just like, what the hell is that? Turn it off. I can't.
Yeah.
You know.
Why do I have the Peterloo massacre in my ear?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's turn Britney back up.
But then we tried to play with that a little bit. So some of the tape stuff was like, you know, kind of fake, like picking people out on the street walking by and making a kind of commentary about the street life on the street, even though it was pre-recorded, but kind of playing with that idea of people walking by and the life of that street.
Yeah, that reminds me of David in Illusions, where he sort of picks out someone on the second row and says, you're going to die. With the commissions that you get, there's often like they're very specific. How much do you see the commission as sort of reigning over you, or do you take the boundaries of that very seriously, or like is there a dialogue when it comes to a brief? And how do you navigate that?
That's a really good question. I suppose it depends on the piece, but yeah, generally I take them quite seriously, and particularly if they're small scale pieces for individual performers, then I think if you don't respect the brief and the desire to commission, then it's probably really going to fail.
With your music, there seems to be this sense of inquisitiveness and interest in stories and anecdotes and just people. Is there some new territory that you would like to go into for the future? Is there something that, like a pipe expectation, pipe dream that you have that you're thinking about for the future?
That's a good question. Probably. Yeah, I mean, well, we're working on new operas and one new opera and new opera ideas more generally for the future. I think opera or music theatre is the world in which I feel most comfortable and most excited about. So I'm probably going to keep doing that. Yeah, I do. I think you're totally right. Like storytelling is definitely the thing that I'm very interested in, and this relationship between words and music and words and stories. Music and stories. So no doubt that will continue. I mean, on a personal level, I would love to get a bit more involved in, as I said before, like other aspects, kind of directing, conducting, writing, even. So that could be interesting. It might be interesting to see. I mean, a lot of our personal stories pieces, kind of queer histories pieces in the past, have tended towards the darker sides of life, let's say, and that's certainly true for the two operas that I've done as well. So I think in the future, I'm looking to do something which is maybe more joyous and more of a kind of song and dance. I mean, the next piece we're working on is going to be more of a song and dance kind of music theatre piece. So that's that will be a new thing, really, to try to make something which is perhaps a bit more vernacular in its aesthetic. Could be exciting.
Do you still see an interest in being more autobiographical, putting more of yourself into it?
Yes, I think as a background strand, that's still kind of on my list of like questions that I ask myself when we're working on a new piece, or when I'm working on a new piece. I believe strongly in that, and that's not going to go away. But I don't have a burning ambition to make pieces that are like principally about myself. I mean, I did do that with the violin concerto, but especially not in terms of opera or stage work, because that would be kind of a bit weird, I think, in some ways. I think it's all, I'm always going to be looking for ways that you can make the piece kind of aware of itself and of its own creation, and that you don't kind of deny the existence of that in the process and then what eventually ends up on stage. I'll always be looking for that meta level.
Is it sort of getting rid of that idea that the composer is sort of God? It's like not human in the process.
Yeah, well, no, maybe not getting rid of that idea, but because, well, I mean, I think if you want to do that, you have to really look at the process of making work. And I tend to be have a traditional process of notation and scoring, and I'm not making so many devised or improvised pieces in a kind of collective. So there is that, but it's more just about staging that process of the staging authorship in a way, and making sure that the authorial voice of the music and the text is that we don't pretend that it doesn't exist, or that the act of theatre is acknowledged.
Very, very interesting. And so for your next work, what can we expect? Can you give us a little hint?
Well, it's definitely going to be, I can't tell you what exactly it is yet, but it's going to be our first really big queer opera. Because the last two operas, I mean, one of them had some queer elements, but that principally that wasn't what they were about. But this one is really going to be a kind of joyous song and dance queer histories piece. And it's going to have a bit of a Baroque model to it, which again has been all of my operas are basically have some kind of Baroque model to them. But this one is going to be much more explicit. And we're trying to do something which is very theatrical, very joyous, and in a way using a much more kind of wider variety of musical styles. So
can you give us an idea of when this is going to be out in the world?
Well, we're working on it now. So, I mean, I think we're probably looking at production in the next season or two.
Very, very, very exciting. I cannot wait.
We'll find out more when it's announced. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Philip, for talking to me. Yeah.
No, thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure.